Kristin Smart vanished on a cool spring night in 1996, and for decades her disappearance haunted California like an unfinished nightmare. Students whispered about it in dorm rooms, investigators chased dead ends, and her parents spent nearly 30 years living inside a question that never seemed to have an answer. But the deeper authorities dug into the case, the darker the story became. What first appeared to be a tragic college disappearance slowly transformed into something far more disturbing, a tale of silence, manipulation, hidden evidence, and a family accused of protecting secrets for decades. Kristin was only 19 years old when she disappeared during Memorial Day weekend near the campus of California Polytechnic State University, widely known as Cal Poly, in San Luis Obispo. Friends described her as energetic, outgoing, and optimistic about the future. She had dreams, plans, and a life that was just beginning. On the night of May 24th, she attended an off-campus party with other students. It was supposed to be another ordinary college evening filled with music, laughter, and late-night conversations. Instead, it became the final night anyone would ever see her alive. As the party wound down, witnesses noticed Kristin was heavily intoxicated. She could barely walk on her own. Concerned students attempted to help her back toward her dormitory. Among those students was Paul Flores, a fellow Cal Poly student whose name would soon become permanently connected to one of California's most infamous missing person cases. Multiple witnesses later stated that Flores inserted himself into the group escorting Kristin home. One by one, the others split away toward their own dorms until eventually Kristin was left alone with him in the darkness. That moment changed everything. According to Paul Flores, he walked Kristin part of the way and then watched her continue toward her dorm alone. But Kristin never made it back to her room. Her personal belongings, including her shoes and identification, were left behind. To her family, that detail was terrifying. Kristin was not the type of person to simply disappear without contacting anyone. Almost immediately, her parents sensed something was horribly wrong. But the early investigation moved painfully slowly. Because it was Memorial Day weekend, authorities initially treated Kristin as a runaway college student rather than a possible victim of violence. Crucial hours slipped away. Potential evidence disappeared. Witness memories faded. And while investigators hesitated, Paul Flores remained free, giving him valuable time before the pressure truly began to build. Then came the detail that immediately caught investigators' attention. When Flores appeared for questioning, he had a visible black eye. His explanation kept changing. At first, he claimed it happened during a basketball game. Later, he said he hit his head while working on his truck. Detectives reportedly found the inconsistent stories suspicious. To many observers, the injury looked like the type of wound someone might receive during a struggle. Still, there wasn't enough physical evidence to arrest him. And so the years passed. What made the case especially chilling was the growing number of rumors surrounding Paul Flores. Former students described him as unsettling long before Kristin disappeared. Women later recalled uncomfortable interactions with him at parties and on campus. Some even said they actively tried to avoid him. Over time, Flores developed a reputation that painted him not as an ordinary student caught in unfortunate circumstances, but as someone many people had already feared. Yet despite all the suspicion, Kristin Smart was never found. The case slowly became one of California's most haunting mysteries. Her parents, Stan and Denise Smart, refused to stop searching. They gave interviews, organized campaigns, and pushed investigators to keep digging even when the case appeared frozen. Every birthday, every holiday, every passing year became another painful reminder that they still had no answers. For decades, the Flores family remained under intense scrutiny. Investigators repeatedly searched properties connected to them. Rumors spread through the community that Kristin's body had been buried somewhere on family land. Neighbors described strange late-night activity years earlier. Some claimed to remember unusual construction projects or suspicious behavior shortly after Kristin vanished. But despite repeated searches, authorities never recovered her remains. That absence became the center of the mystery. Without a body, prosecutors faced enormous obstacles. Murder cases are difficult enough under normal circumstances. A murder prosecution without a body is one of the hardest legal battles imaginable. Defense attorneys can always argue that a missing person simply chose to leave. They can challenge forensic evidence, witness memories, and timelines. And for years, that uncertainty protected Paul Flores from criminal charges. Then technology changed everything. As forensic science advanced, investigators revisited evidence that had once seemed useless. Ground-penetrating radar, specialized cadaver dogs, and sophisticated soil analysis opened new possibilities. Authorities began examining areas beneath decks, concrete slabs, and backyard structures connected to the Flores family. Investigators eventually focused intensely on a specific property owned by Ruben Flores, Paul's father. During excavations, forensic specialists reportedly discovered soil disturbances consistent with the burial site. More importantly, laboratory testing identified traces suggesting the presence of human decomposition. That revelation sent shockwaves through the case. For years, many people suspected Kristin had once been buried there. Now investigators believed science was finally supporting those suspicions. Prosecutors argued that Kristin's body may have originally been hidden beneath the deck before later being moved. If true, it suggested something even darker than a single murder, a coordinated effort to conceal evidence over decades. The theory transformed public understanding of the case. This was no longer simply about a college student disappearing after a party. It became a story about silence, loyalty, and the terrifying possibility that multiple people may have helped protect a killer. Then came another turning point nobody expected. In 2019, a podcast called Your Own Backyard, created by Chris Lambert, reignited worldwide attention on Kristin Smart's disappearance. Unlike sensationalized true crime productions, Lambert approached the story with patience and relentless detail. He interviewed witnesses, revisited timelines, and uncovered forgotten information buried beneath decades of silence. The podcast exploded in popularity. More importantly, it generated new leads. People who had stayed silent for years suddenly came forward. Former classmates shared memories they had never reported. Community members discussed suspicious events they had once dismissed. The renewed public attention placed enormous pressure on investigators and prosecutors. Many observers believe the podcast directly contributed to the eventual arrests. In 2021, authorities arrested Paul Flores for Kristin Smart's murder. His father, Ruben Flores, was also charged as an accessory after the fact for allegedly helping conceal the crime. After nearly 25 years, the case was finally heading toward trial. The courtroom proceedings became one of the most closely watched criminal cases in California. Prosecutors faced a monumental challenge. They had no body, no murder weapon, and no direct eyewitness to the killing itself. Instead, they built their case through circumstantial evidence, forensic findings, witness testimony, and patterns of behavior. One of the most powerful aspects of the prosecution involved testimony from women who described encounters with Paul Flores after Kristin disappeared. Several women accused him of drugging or sexually assaulting them in later years. Prosecutors argued these accounts demonstrated a continuing pattern of predatory behavior. The testimony painted a disturbing portrait. Rather than someone traumatized by past events, prosecutors described Flores as a man who believed he could continue victimizing women without consequences. The image that emerged was deeply unsettling. Not a single terrible mistake, but an alleged predator who operated for years while escaping accountability. Meanwhile, forensic experts testified about the soil evidence found beneath Ruben Flores' property. Specialists discussed signs consistent with human decomposition and burial disturbances. Though Kristin's remains had never been recovered, prosecutors argued the physical evidence strongly supported the conclusion that her body had once been there. The defense attacked every aspect of the prosecution's case. Attorneys argued the investigation had become contaminated by media attention and public pressure. They challenged forensic interpretations and insisted the evidence remained speculative. They portrayed the prosecution's theory as an elaborate assumption built on emotion rather than certainty. But after weeks of testimony, the jury reached its decision. In October 2022, Paul Flores was found guilty of first-degree murder in the killing of Kristin Smart. For the Smart family, the verdict represented a massive emotional moment. After more than 26 years, a A court officially recognized what they had believed all along. Kristin had been murdered. Yet even in that moment, something was still missing. Kristin herself had not been found. That painful reality meant the case remained emotionally unfinished. A conviction brought accountability, but it could not provide the closure that comes with recovering a loved one's remains. For Stan and Denise Smart, the search continued even after the trial ended, and investigators kept digging. What makes the Kristin Smart case especially haunting is the possibility that her remains were repeatedly moved over the years. Prosecutors suggested the Flores family may have relocated evidence whenever they feared authorities were getting too close. If true, it would explain why searches repeatedly uncovered suspicious signs without leading directly to Kristin. The theory also points toward a chilling level of long-term coordination. Maintaining a secret for decades requires extraordinary commitment. It means enduring police searches, public suspicion, media scrutiny, and legal pressure without breaking. Investigators increasingly came to believe this silence was not accidental. It was deliberate. The emotional cruelty of that possibility devastated the public. While the Smart family spent decades desperately searching for answers, the people accused of hiding the truth continued living ordinary lives. Holidays came and went. Careers continued. Families gathered for dinners, all while Kristin remained missing. The contrast is difficult to comprehend. Over time, the case also transformed campus safety laws and investigative procedures in California. Kristin's disappearance exposed serious failures in how colleges and police departments handled missing student reports during the 1990s. Delays, assumptions, and communication breakdowns may have cost investigators critical opportunities during the earliest hours of the case. As a result, reforms were introduced to improve coordination between universities and law enforcement agencies when students disappear. Kristin Smart's legacy ultimately extended far beyond her own tragedy. Her case changed policies designed to protect future students. But emotionally, the wound never fully healed. For many people who followed the story, the most disturbing aspect wasn't simply the murder itself. It was the silence afterward, the refusal to provide answers. The idea that Kristin's family spent nearly 30 years trapped in uncertainty, while others allegedly knew far more than they admitted. That silence became its own form of cruelty. Even after conviction, authorities continued searching properties connected to the Flores family. Advances in forensic technology allowed investigators to examine soil chemistry and decomposition evidence in ways impossible during the 1990s. Every new search reignited hope that Kristin might finally be brought home. And every search reminded the world that the story still wasn't over. The Kristin Smart case also demonstrated the evolving power of independent journalism and public pressure. Without renewed attention from podcasts, digital communities, and modern media, it is possible the case might have remained cold forever. Instead, millions of people became emotionally invested in finding justice for a young woman they had never met. That public attention mattered. It encouraged witnesses to speak. It forced difficult questions back into the spotlight. And it ensured investigators never completely stopped searching. Today, Kristin Smart's name represents far more than a missing person case. She symbolizes persistence in the face of silence. Her parents became examples of extraordinary resilience, refusing to surrender even after decades of heartbreak. Investigators continued chasing evidence long after many people assumed the truth would never emerge. And eventually, piece by piece, the wall surrounding the case began to crack. The mystery surrounding Kristin Smart lasted nearly 30 years because secrets were buried beneath fear, loyalty, and silence. But time has a way of exposing what people try hardest to hide. Scientific advances uncovered traces hidden beneath soil. Witnesses rediscovered their courage. Journalists reopened forgotten doors. And eventually, the truth became impossible to contain forever. Yet despite convictions and discoveries, one heartbreaking reality remains unchanged. Kristin Smart still has not been fully returned to her family. That absence continues to haunt the case. It leaves an emptiness at the center of the story that no courtroom verdict can completely erase. Justice, in many ways, remains incomplete until Kristin is finally found and laid to rest. But after decades of uncertainty, one thing is now undeniable. Kristin Smart did not simply vanish. Something terrible happened that night in 1996, and for years the truth was hidden behind silence and fear. The world now understands that the mystery surrounding her disappearance was darker, deeper, and far more disturbing than almost anyone originally imagined. And even after 30 years, the search for Kristin and the full truth continues.